Namaste. I am Gadadhar from International Institute of Vedic Sciences, Rishivatika, and I welcome you all to this Dr. Vedavyas Memorial Online Lecture Series. Today is the 100th lecture in this 108 series, and let's start with a short prayer. Akhanda Mandalakaram Vyaptam Yena Characharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Ajnanatimirandasya Jnanam Chalashalakaya Chakshurum Nilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So today we have with us Dr. B. Mahadevan ji, Professor of Operation Management at Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. And today is our 100th talk in this 108 series. Today he'll talk on management and spirituality, let the twain shall meet. And management and spirituality are never considered related in any ways as per our current modern thinking. The question that begs some attention is how valid is this assumption? Dr. Mahadevan ji will provide a bird's view of the interconnectedness between spirituality and management and provide alternate perspectives on these issues from the Indian spiritual tradition. It's my honor and privilege to introduce Dr. B. Mahadevan ji. Namaste, Mahadevan ji. Welcome to this talk.
Namaste, namaste.
Yes. Dr. B. Mahadevan ji is a professor of operation management at the Institute of Management, Bangalore, where he has been teaching since 1992. He was the founding vice chancellor of Chinmaya Vidyapit, a university for Sanskrit and Indic knowledge. In this assignment, he was responsible for creating new generation of academic programs in higher education space that seamlessly blends ancient Indian knowledge traditions with contemporary knowledge systems. He was also the Dean Administration of IIM Bangalore and a member of the governing body of IIM B for 4 years. Professor Mahadevan ji also is in the board of IIM Kashipur and IIT Madras. He is also in an international advisory board of California Management Review. Earlier, he was in the board of Indian Oil Corporation. Professor Mahadevan ji received his MTech PhD from the Industrial Engineering and Management Division of IIT Madras. He holds a bachelor's degree in engineering, in production engineering from the College of Engineering, Gindi, Madras. So I now request Mahadevan ji to take over from here and give us his talk. Namaste, Mahadevan ji. Yeah.
Namaste and thank you, Gadadhar, for inviting me for this. I thank International Institute of Vedic Sciences for inviting me for this Dr. Vyas Memorial Lecture. It is my privilege and I feel blessed to be part of this nice activity that you are all doing. And it's also my pleasure to talk to all of those who are assembled here on this topic of management and spirituality. You know, I was just thinking about it. It looks like these are completely unconnected material. You know, that is what we all think. There's no way we can put management and spirituality side by side and think that they are anywhere related. But that's precisely what I wanted to do today in terms of trying to make that connection. The reason is not far-fetched. Why do we think like this? I mean, this is a very common thinking. Now, the reason is not too far-fetched. simply because what really happens is moment you say spirituality, as we have generally understood, well, there are certain uh, mental models we have. We generally come to a conclusion that these people are not interested in worldly affairs. Okay, we think like that. Spirituality means not interested in worldly affairs, not driven by any goals, as though, and then also a feeling that uh, you know not there isn't it's a low energy, it's all meant only for people, very elderly people, perhaps after 60 years after the retirement. There's a whole lot of mental models behind it's they don't put up a very good they show, they have become very disinterested in worldly activities. I mean, I can go on, putting a long list of things that otherwise well-meaning people have this feeling that such very spiritually oriented people may not participate in the world of Vyavahara. They will not work with any interest. Take it easy, chalta attitude. I mean, I can give you a whole lot of. I don't know where from this came, but a lot of us seriously think, attach all these tags to what is called spirituality, and therefore I am not really surprised that we don't see management and spirituality in any ways connected with one another. And there are also many other things. I have heard a lot of people saying that if people imbibe spirituality early in their life, they will not develop too much interest in day-to-day life matters. They will have an unsuccessful family life, all that things. Uh, but there is a mother of all these are misconceptions. But there's a mother of all these misconceptions, which I also, you know, uh, I want to bring, and that is people think. I mean, this is the according to me, this is the worst idea that people have. If people think that if you are spiritual in whatever ways they have understood it, that part we'll see later. If you are spiritual, then you don't have to do any rituals and pujas. In other words, you can, take huge discounts in your religious life. Okay, you need not have to follow any of the time-tested practices which our elders may be following. In other words, you do not need the achara and the vichara of the normal family life and the social life. I don't know where from this idea came. To me, this is the mother of all misconceptions. So if you put all these together, I am really not surprised that people feel that we don't really need spirituality, and so leave alone management. Even in social life, we'll think about it after 60 years. Why are you now talking about spirituality in management? It is even a distant possibility. So this is the starting point for me. Now, before we get into what is spirituality and what we may uh, possibly need to uh, understand and do with spirituality and so on, let us start by asking some of the issues that we face today. And purely from a point of view of management, I'm talking now. I mean, I can talk spirituality as at a very general level, but today I have chosen to a little bit, scope it to management, because that is the chosen topic that we have taken. Now, if you look at what kind of issues do we face today, again, one can put a whole lot of laundry list of things which every one of us will agree. Simple. We will start with health. The two biggest, killers, life-threatening diseases are actually diabetic and hypertension. It is not so much COVID. Don't worry, actually. COVID, the number of people dying on account of COVID Number of people who have died on account of COVID in the last 1 year is less than the number of people who died in accidents, on fatal accidents on the road. So now I'm not belittling the efforts on COVID. I didn't mean it. What I'm saying is the most threatening disease health issue is diabetic and hypertension world over. Everybody, youngsters are getting diabetic. India's diabetic incidence is increasing hugely. There are reports which says India is the diabetic capital of India, of the world, and so on. This is one major problem that we face. Okay, there is a health issues. We need to ask, why are these health issues coming? We cannot push it under the carpet, or go by issues which we don't seem to understand. And there are very concrete issues behind all these. If you look at working people today, okay, I find they belong to two categories. I rather call it as two stages. The work life has become like that, two stages. Stage one is called workaholic. What it means is, you'll do almost anything for your job, ignoring other important aspects in your life. People who love you frequently complain that you are working too much. Your relationship with family is suffering because of work longer and harder. These are become very common. This I call it a stage one, and this is called workaholics. Now, if somebody is in this stage of workaholics for a long time, which unfortunately many of our youngsters are, I don't know why, but they are. This very seriously, I'm telling. Then they will get into what I call it a stage two. Stage two is called worn-outs. From workaholics, you will become worn-outs. What does that mean? That means you can't concentrate. You always have too much to do. You feel guilty, physically and emotionally exhausted. Mood changes very often. You get cynical. You also get sick. All kinds of things happen. I'm not painting a very grim picture. I'm saying today's management and working and corporate life is actually showing these things in front of us. So these kinds of issues have actually threatened what is called work-life balance. Nobody has a clue on work-life. In fact, people do not know whether work and life are two sides of the same coin or they are two different coins. God knows. Our youngsters definitely don't know. I sometimes feel very sorry for them actually, and very concerned about what is happening. So this, of course, there are these talk about work-life balance. These are all become fancy words in management, but people don't understand that the key to work-life balance actually lies in spirituality, which will come a little later. Now, I have been seeing, I've been reading as a professor of management. I've been reading, since these are areas of my interest, I have been generally reading some papers and so on. I find a few, repeatedly, I find certain things being said again and again. I would, share a few of them. First of all, in many of the research papers, all that I read, what I find is workers worldwide, not just India, workers worldwide face extended work hours, work overload, job burnout, mental stress. So many things are being talked about. But even more concerned is not that. I am more concerned even more on something else which I find in many of these papers being written. And that is a growing number of dissatisfied employees in a number of places. They complain of deprived meaning in their workplace. See, the place we work should be meaningful to us. I mean, I will tell you, a priest in a temple, if he finds deprived meaning, that job is going to be stressful. This homemaker or this spouse at home, either the husband or the wife cooking, let us say, does not find any meaning in the job, it will be stressful. So we have to find meaning. Human beings go after meaning. That is very peculiar about us. So therefore, when this report says, there are a lot of research reports which are saying that there are growing number of dissatisfied employees and they're complaining of deprived meaning. That's something which we have to take very seriously. I don't think we can take it lightly. So the question that begs is why are people dissatisfied? Why they are not able to make meaning in their workplace? And there are other studies which keep saying that managers want a deeper sense of meaning and fulfillment on the job, even more than they want, money and time off. And there are other reports which I have read which says that workers feel, or managers and these so-called new classical workers feel that work can provide opportunity for spiritual and personal growth in addition to financial growth. Today it's all about your money, your incentives, your promotions, your pay rise. We just destroy ourselves with this conversation. Whereas if the place where I am spending 12 to 14 hours a day, every day, even perhaps 6 days a week, I go at leave home at, I mean, maybe working from home today, but some of these issues don't change dramatically. I work from morning 8 to evening 8 or 9. And if that place does not provide me an opportunity for spiritual and personal growth, where is it going to happen? I'll just come home and then have food and eat and sleep. I have destroyed myself in the process. Every individual can destroy themselves in this process if the workplace cannot provide an opportunity for spiritual and personal growth. Why are large organizations not understanding this basic idea? Are we human beings or are we machines, being pumped with the electricity and the energy and petrol that will work without any emotions? That's not true. Therefore, this whole idea that spirituality has to be kept out of management is flawed, basically flawed. It shows a lack of understanding of the reality because the signals are all over the place. I have been reading, I was just looking at the other day, there was in Indian Express, I was in Cochin, and I was just going through the paper. There was an article with some photographs and all that. It says in the last 3 years or 10 years, I don't remember. In the last so many years, Indians have become more richer and less happier. I mean, do we have to keep reading these and then brush it aside, or do we have to understand the sukshma of these statements? If somebody becomes richer and not happier, it is a classic indication that there is a spiritual quotient which is empty. Such a person is devoid of spirituality. That is what it actually points to. Therefore, this idea that spirituality is a very alien concept is actually a very old concept. If we are still reveling in that concept, it is time that we wake up and we really come to a conclusion that there is something more. So the point I'm making is spirituality is not going to be a very alien idea for a simple reason. You cannot reduce human behavior at the workplace. I'm talking about management. That's why I'm emphasizing that. Human behavior at the workplace cannot be reduced to a pure search for self-interest and money. I think that's a too simplistic an assumption. The large paradigms of management today seem to live with this wrong idea that pro-social behavior, altruism, all those are all fine. They're all will talk elsewhere. That's not true. If workplace don't get into spirituality seriously, we are on a time bomb because human beings will just get destroyed. It's not going to work. So there is a growing evidence that moral values are very important. Greater common good, all these are very important even for business performance. There are again another set of studies which I have seen. So therefore, I think all these are pointing to a situation where we cannot keep management and spirituality in two separate compartments and believe that you can manage it in a very independent fashion and all is well. I think that's a bad understanding. It's a short-sighted view. That's a heights of ignorance that we may be actually pretending to show. So this is one part of the story. There is another part of the story which also seems to suggest that it is inevitable to be spiritual. Nobody can escape being spiritual. Why do you say that? Now, if crisis hits an individual, I mean, COVID is a certain kind of a crisis which has hit every one of us. Right from that, other day I go to Chennai, some family function I have to attend, I go. And what I find on the face of that 4-year-old child, not being able to go to the school and play with the other schoolmates and sitting in front of a computer in the first standard, second standard, they are going through a problem. So crisis has hit everyone in their own ways. So if crisis hits us, we become very thoughtful in life. Do we need a framework to handle crisis? It's one thing to say we will pray that let us not have crisis. That's a very meaning prayer. But that doesn't mean crisis will not come to us. In fact, I am reminded of this shloka in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, Matra sparshasta kaunteya, Sitoshna sukha dukkataha, agamapayino anityaha, tam titikshasva bharata. Life is a roller coaster. It blows hot and cold. That's what Krishna says. So the fact that life blows hot and cold and it's a roller coaster, life is a roller coaster, requires a certain framework for us to actually make sense of this. Because if you don't know how to make sense of this, I don't know what are we going to do. I have seen people, I give such lectures and sometimes I, talk to people, they come after the lecture, you have a little bit of a conversation and so on. So in several occasions, I have people come and confide to me, sir, I am 65 years, I'm 70 years. I must honestly tell you, I feel defeated in life. I have spent 70 years, but at the end of it, I don't think there is a feeling of self-defeat. I don't think that's a good idea. We should not, ignore things and keep doing something. And suddenly one day, it dawns upon us that we have wasted our life. That's not a good idea. I think we should be a lot more wiser in life. Third, things in life has 3 very important attributes. I call it as perishables. Life is all of perishable inventory. As a professor of operations management, inventory, I keep talking. So life is a perishable commodity. And there are 3 fundamental reasons why everything is perishable. Your youthfulness is perishable. Your mood is perishable. Your title and position is perishable. Your money is perishable. Your relationship is perishable. Why? Because there are only 3 things which govern our life. Almost everything in life is finite, including the life itself. One day we'll have to go. So finiteness, that's the first dimension. Then intermittent. Many things that happen to us will be only intermittent. That's what Krishna said. Agamapayino anityaha. He used the word anitya. So intermittent. Happiness will be there. You can't be happy from morning to evening. In fact, that will be actually a very boring idea. There should be bouts of happiness. You can't be happy for morning to evening. I mean, you'll go mad actually. So intermittent. Many things that we have are only intermittent. And everything that we have are impermanent. These 3 are the driving. So these are not ideas of pessimism. These are ideas of realism. If we understand this, then we start becoming spiritual in life. Spirituality comes into us. Okay? Because if we do not understand these things very well, we may be miserable in life, whether in a workplace, whether you are a manager, whether you are a head of a family, whether you are a spouse, or whether you are a brother or a son or a father. It doesn't change. We need to develop this level of wisdom. And lastly, from a management perspective, if you need to manage, people, manage situations, manage others, manage programs, it all starts with an ability to manage yourself. People who do not know how to manage themselves will not be able to manage anything worth the salt in any significant, I mean, something will keep happening. I'm not talking about those things. I'm talking about serious management. If somebody has to be very, very good manager, a great leader, then it starts from managing from within. In fact, chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita informs only this. This is the only message. This great warrior called Arjuna just came to the battlefield and collapsed. That's the end of the story. What is going to manage? Nothing. He is already collapsed. Sidanti mamagatrani mukam cha parisushete vepatascha sharire me romahashram sajayate. Gandivam sramsrate hasta. It is slipping out of my hand. I am losing grip. Brahmathivacha me manaha. That's what he says. I have just, my head is spinning. So even to be a good manager, we need to manage ourselves. Now the question is, what do you mean by managing oneself? In fact, the roots of spirituality lie only here. If somebody can understand spirituality properly, if somebody can understand what exactly spirituality means, such a person will start managing himself or herself so well, so confidently, that the world of management opportunity is open for such a person. Therefore, spirituality is inevitable, whichever way you look at it. I gave all kinds of examples just to drive this point. So whichever way we look at it, personal life, professional life, managing yourself, managing people and organizations, you need a sound and a robust framework. And that is what spirituality actually gives us. Because it is very simple that inner satisfaction and peace, these two are important prerequisites for succeeding in the world outside. We need to understand that. Unless somebody has inner satisfaction and peace, they cannot succeed in the world outside. Because only when we have that inner satisfaction and peace, there is a possibility of uncoiling enormous energy from within. There is so much of energy. There is so much of energy within. We need to actually uncoil that. And the only way to uncoil that is we should be feeling very good, very satisfied, very peaceful. And that all these that I am talking about lies in the domain of spirituality. So I think it is very important for us to understand what is the spirituality that we talk about. And therefore, then we can say whether we need spirituality in management, which will become a corollary. We need to get this very clearly. So what is this spirituality? Suppose we have to ask. Well, there are many ways to articulate that. So let me use a few sort of simple bullets to explain. I think the starting point is spirituality is a basic feeling of being connected with oneself. We should feel connected with oneself. You know, in modern management literature, they use a term called authenticity. You have to be authentic. You know, today people talk about authentic leadership. Now, what is this authenticity? Authenticity means I connect to myself. I cannot be, you know, I am X and I behave like Y. That doesn't work. I should get seamlessly connected with myself. That is the first definition of spirituality. A basic feeling of being connected with oneself and others and the entire universe. Jiva, Jagat, Ishvara. Everything must be connected. So it is an axis of interconnectedness. That is the first definition of spirituality. There is a strong axis of interconnectedness. Point number one. Point number two. Spirituality also means a basic belief that there is some supreme power. You know, if you are a believer of a faith, you may use a certain name of a god. It doesn't really matter. The fact remains that we believe that there is a superpower, a force, whichever way you want to call it, that governs the entire universe, and that becomes the part and expression of this oneness that we talk about. So it brings that oneness. So it is a sense of transcendence. Everything is so a fundamental feeling that you are part and parcel of everything. The physical universe, the whole of humanity, everything is connected. That is, so it is that belief in transcendence, a strong sense of interconnectedness. And because of that interconnectedness and transcendence, there is a feeling of love and compassion that will very naturally come. A spiritual person will have a lot of compassion. Genuine love and compassion is part of a spiritual person for others and their life circumstances and so on. And lastly, spirituality also means a sense of life purpose or meaning in the earthly world. That is what spirituality. There is a meaning. There's a reason why I do things. I see a purpose. I see a larger picture. I see myself with a greater sort of a, because then all these interconnectedness, transcendence will get us to that feeling actually. A sense of meaning will descend upon us. So if people are saying, earlier I was alluding to this point, if people are saying that there is a deprived meaning in workplace, it essentially means two things. One, that person has no iota of spirituality. So his or her ability to make meaning is gone. Secondly, the place is also not very conducive. It is not creating a conducive situation for being spiritual. So this is what spirituality is. Because if we don't get this idea right, if we don't understand this part very well, then all that I said, spirituality means disinterested in life, no goals. In fact, none of the definition that I have given you does not prevent you from setting goals, does not prevent you from getting interested in doing. In fact, it will make you more interested. The interconnectedness axis of spirituality, if you got it, you'll only become more interested about life, more interested about people around us, but in a slightly different way. The lens will change. That's the charm of spirituality that I think must descend on all of us. So the question is, how would this spirituality influence us eventually, so that we'll also become very good manager or leader, whatever we have chosen to be? That's what is a very important thing for us to understand. So a person who is into this path of spirituality, the way I have sort of described, let me tell you what will happen to that person first. There will be a significant change you will see in that person's behavior. And that change, amongst other things, would actually mean that that person will stop whiling away time on matters which are actually less interesting. Gossiping about somebody, chit-chatting about some wrong things or about, kind of. I think such a person actually go away from that, because this larger picture takes over this person. So it is actually an agenda about oneself. Spirituality journey is all about an agenda about oneself. And what is that agenda? It's about a desire to know the quintessential truth of what we experience in our life. We go through a lot of experiences. Method of deep introspection will develop, self-reflection and all that will develop. A positive curiosity. That's why, let me tell you this. In other words, a person who develops spirituality will actually develop good skills in sense making. Now, I think the moment I use the word sense making, people can get confused. Sense making is not trying to, rationally analyze events in life and then attribute it to, it happened because, all that we do as part of our work. A spiritual person, when you say sense making, is very different from this kind of analyzing events. It is about a positive curiosity about life as it unfolds. There is a larger understanding. Oh, things happen like this. Okay, there seems to be a much larger picture being, unfolded here. That's okay. That kind of a orientational change actually gives them a deeper sense making of life, rather than getting upset about certain ups and downs that we go through in life. But in management, this is where we all get succumbed to. My colleague gets a promotion faster than me, finished. My whole, I get depressed. All my skills fade. I become and it's a vicious circle, huh? Right? So the more and more it happens, your performance dips, your promotion gets delayed. People think, and you start thinking unsure of who you are, and so many things happen. All these are because that spiritual quotient is missing. Sense making is not that. Sense making is take what comes because you believe there is a larger picture. So we don't have to make a rational sense of events, but we can develop a positive curiosity to life as it unfolds with its own set of pluses and minuses. That's what will bring. So it will be very different from this reasoning and analytical thinking and all that kind of a thing. A person who develops a good sense of spirituality actually will he or she starts seeing a larger jigsaw puzzle. Life is not a very narrow, what is in it for me, do I get this, we all start like that. That's okay. But the more and more this spiritual thinking engulfs us, we start seeing life a little bigger. That's the part of the sense making. So we see us in a larger jigsaw puzzle. Okay. And if you ask, so what will happen? A few things will happen. These are all people, I'm sure many of us have our own experiences. I'm only trying to connect them in a particular way to this notion of spirituality. Such people will find that the ego will start diminishing very dramatically. You will find that the ego is not calling too often and doing the spoil sport. That may not happen. So ego can dramatically diminish as we go along. Risk-taking propensity actually increases. This is the biggest reason why people need to develop spirituality, so that they can be, in management, we talk about we should be more risk-taking, but management never tells you what attitude, what kind of a value system and perspective you should have so that you will take more risks in life. That nobody teaches. Management only says take risks and rewards are connected. Those kinds of things we say. It never tells you why would you take risk. How would your propensity to take risk will increase? If only people become spiritual, they will take risk. Otherwise, people won't take risk. People who are not spiritual are people who suffer from fear. They have huge fear because they think they have to solve everything, every problem they have to solve. Everything is they put it onto their head, and the head weight increases, and it creates its own problems sometime. So actually, a spiritual person I have seen are those who have a greater propensity to take risk, which is a very good thing in management. And in order to take risk, you don't have to attend risk-taking classes. You have to develop this notion of this spiritual sense in you. You'll say, life will happen. Let me take my step forward and go. Life is a roller coaster ride. Let anything happen. I think there's a cause for which I need to work. I find meaning in what I'm doing. That kind of a thing. Compassion coexists with authority and power. Management gives you power. Management does not give you compassion. It's only spirituality which gives you. A leader who has compassion with power is the most successful leader, I'm telling you. Not the leaders who are all, discounting others, looking down upon subordinates, harassing them because they have the power to do. They're all very ordinary, mediocre leadership. I'll talk about leadership very soon because that's where I see a great deal of this spirituality really radiating in its full measure and so on, right? And the very idea of spirituality growing in me will express itself by saying that it creates a drive in a spiritual person to make a difference to the world and before he goes. That person wants to make a difference to the world because he sees the sense of interconnectedness. He sees that larger force which is at play. Therefore, and this is very required. This is the prerequisite for inspirational leadership. If you have to do very inspirational things, you should be able to really, go forward and say that I want to make a difference and go. So I mentioned three important parameters. So let me connect all these three to management. First of all, I said interconnectedness is one axis of spirituality. Meaningful work is the second, transcendence, a larger force, and so on. So let me tell you, how will it play out in management? How would it make the quality of management better? First, let us take interconnectedness. If you take interconnectedness, the first thing that will happen is there will be a greater sense of community. It's very important to be a great leader. You should feel a sense, you should not feel very exclusive. If you feel very exclusive, you will be a poor leader actually. You will be sitting actually in a, you will be just sitting in a concrete wall with no friends for you. That's what is going to happen. So therefore, the sense of interconnectedness brings a sense of community. There's a lot of sharing and caring, which will be a corollary of this interconnectedness. Teamwork and cooperation, empathy, inclusiveness. These are the things people are talking about today to be a good manager and a good leader. To be a great leader, you should be sharing and caring. You should be able to be very comfortably, facilitating teamwork. You should have a lot of empathy, otherwise you can never be a great leader. You need a lot of empathy, inclusiveness, sense of belonging. Now, all these are told, these are laundry list told, but nobody tells how will you develop that, how will you imbibe these values in you? How will you imbibe these behavioral traits in you? That comes only through spirituality, because spirituality is all about interconnectedness. It's an expression of love and respect. So all these, I believe, bring great managers. Therefore, spirituality is very important for management from an axis of interconnectedness. Second one is meaningful work. Now, as a person develops spirituality, that person develops the meaning making, as I was telling a short while ago. So work will be viewed as a calling, not as a way to manage the boss and get some promotion, some more increments. They are all important. I think promotions are important, increments are important. But if you think that's how you are going to drive your work, that will create needless stress. That will create health problems. They are important, but I think the most important, they are subordinate goals. The main goal is work as a calling. Work as a calling will come only when you are able to do meaningful work. And you should develop that sense making and meaning making, which comes by, spirituality. And that meaning making also will help us drive, work will be driven by personal values, honesty and integrity, the authentic. I talked about authentic leadership and authentic work. That will happen only because of spirituality. Otherwise, all these are very artificial, and if these are happening to people, they are spiritual. That's the meaning. Nobody puts a sticker on the forehead. I am 80% spiritual, 70% spiritual. Nobody puts a sticker. I am saying if such things you see, there is a good SQ in them, spirituality quotient in them. There is a striving for excellence, which is very characteristic of spiritual people. Contrary to this misconception, they are disinterested. No, spiritual people, because they have no fear. They want to contribute to the society, make a difference and go. So they will actually work with a lot more purpose, with a lot more rigor and so on. That is what meaning making will bring to management. Transcendence. If a spiritual person very well understands the notion of transcendence, right, then he will definitely understand what Krishna said. Nimitta matram bhavasabhyasachin. In chapter 11, he told Arjuna, let me tell you, at one level, Krishna told Arjuna, at one level, if you go deep and understand these events in life, at one level, you should understand we are instruments of action. So this I am doing, the ego business will be cut to size. If the ego business is cut to size, then the fear and the pride, and they are all interrelated, right? If you are so much worried about pride, then there's a fear of failure will come. The success and failure are all related to the ego. So the moment you think you are an instrument of action in the hands of a larger force, actually you will become less fearful. Because even the failure you wouldn't bother. I mean, you'll take it and go. I mean, that's okay. You'll take it and go. We believe strongly we are guided by invisible hands, and therefore we freely work without too much of fear. We are able to connect to something larger. I think these are very important. If you don't develop these habits, if you don't develop these behavioral traits, I don't think we will do great job of management. And all these behavioral traits, as I told you, are coming from spirituality. That's why the spirituality will make a difference. So at an individual dimension, if you really ask me, okay, spirituality will clarify long-term goals and purposes in one's life. They are not going to waste their time, buttering the hands of the boss, getting one increment 2 months ahead of his, his co-worker. I mean, all those are low-level thinking. And there are a lot of people doing it, and God bless them. I am only saying that you can have larger goals if you have a little spirituality in you. So long-term goals and purpose in one's life will happen. That will help develop faith, strength, and support from within to face life situations. That is why such people will be very fearless. They'll be emboldened to take decisions fearlessly, and all these will reflect in the way an individual approaches work and their follow. Now, what more do we need in management? These are nice things that we need to bring onto the table in the name of management. That's why I think spirituality is a very, very important requirement in management. Now, just as these individual dimension, there is an organizational dimension also. I didn't get into those details. Yes, spiritual organization will clarify what an organization and its people stand for unambiguously, as much as an individual does. It will help identify unambiguously moral, ethical, and personal values for the organization, and the organization culture will develop out of it, and it influences all choices made in the business. So what happens at an individual level, some of them will happen at the organizational dimension also. That's why spirituality flows into the organization in more than one ways. Now, the greatest fallout of all these is actually leadership. I have found, if you really ask me, I have found that people who have a great sense, they're able to develop their spiritual quotient very well, are those who turn out to be great leaders, absolutely great leaders. Now, I am reminded of this. Jim Collins wrote a book called Good to Great. 2001, 2002, he wrote a book. In that, he defined what is called level 5 leadership. He said level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and then he said level 5 leadership, which he considered as the ultimate. Now, there are a few things he mentioned there, which are very interesting. And if you can connect all of them to spirituality, actually. For example, he said level 5 leaders in his sample, he had a sample in which he actually identified certain companies as great companies. From good, they have gone to great. So in that company, he looked at many things. One of them is leadership. So when he discussed leadership, he said such leadership, he called them as level 5 leadership. So he mentioned some attributes. He said he observed some key attributes in those companies, and he called them as the attributes of level 5 leadership. I want to say a few of them. First of all, he said that level 5 leaders had a paradoxical blend of personal humility and intense professional will. In fact, he even writes, if I remember, he writes in his book that many times he could not even find out who was the leader. He was a sada sida looking simple person, but he was really after getting things done for the organization. Intense professional will coexists with personal humility. They are not flamboyant, they are not cowboyish, nothing of that kind. They look very sada sida, they can relate to people so well, but they drive results. That comes out of this spirituality, as you can connect these to many things that we spoke so far. He said they channel their ego needs away from themselves into the larger goal of building a great company. So the sense making and the larger purpose of life overpowers this narrow ego business. That's what he also observed. He says ambition first and foremost is institution and not themselves. So the self-centeredness is antithesis to spirituality. A spiritual person will learn how to take the hands off. Let anything happen. I am inspired by a larger goal. So let me work for it. So he mentions what is called window and a mirror approach. He mentions this word window and mirror approach. He says such leaders, when there is a great success that happens, they look out of the window looking for someone, and when great failure happens, they look at the mirror. They say, I am responsible for it. I am entirely responsible for it. So it needs a great internal strength to do all these. You cannot do it just like that. You need great strength to do all these. So that's what he calls as level 5 leadership. Also, he mentioned that there are certain attributes that he noticed, which he found very interesting in level 5 leadership. He said such people had unwavering faith, significant life experiences that spark. That's what he said. Then he used the word, such people had inner development. So this inner development is a function of spirituality. Only people who have spirituality will have this inner development. They will, have a fully blown Vyaktitva Vikasa, if I have to use a word like that. So such things are possible only with leadership. So there is, and because of the interconnectedness and so on, such leaders will see enormous value in interdependence. Again, in Bhagavad Gita, there's a beautiful shloka which says, Devan bhavayata anena, te deva bhavayantu vaha, parasparam bhavayantaha shreyaha param avapsyata. That's what Krishna says. You reach the pinnacle of shreyas, success, only when you know the value of paraspara bhava. Great leadership is all about knowing that the world is connected with them in many ways. So they are part and parcel of the world. So that's what is the greatest takeaway that comes out of spirituality for management. I want to end this talk with a couple of things. I met a person and carried an interview also of that person in our journal several years back, about 8 years back. This person ran a company called Polyhedron, which is in, I think, Hubli, Hubli, I think. Polyhedron, they were manufacturing some valves and so on. Absolutely runs this business with spirituality. And so I was asking, what do you mean by spirituality? How do you run a business with spirituality? What do you mean by spirituality and so on? I asked him, please define spirituality. And this is the definition he gave me. He said, spirituality is nothing but an expression of purity. He said, if a person wants to be spiritual, then he should purify the action, speech, and thought and align all the three. He said that's the only way to become. He said, sir, I don't know, I have not read big scriptures and so on. I have attended some Ramakrishna lectures and all that, but let me tell you, this is what spirituality is. And I asked him, can business can also be spiritual? He said, of course. He said, business can also be made spiritual by purifying the leader's actions, speech, and thought, and the philosophy and the principles of doing business. And then a very interesting conversation I had, and he said, he said, sir, I practice what is called a ladder of joy, spirituality and the ladder of joy. I asked him, what is this ladder? Ladder means you have step, no? So he said, to be joyful, I'll come from the top of the step to the bottom of the step now. I'll come in the reverse because, I'm now in the top of the ladder, I'll come to the bottom. He said, to be joyful. He said, this is how he became spiritual and ran the business also in a very spiritual way. He said, to be joyful in life, you necessarily have to be spiritual. That's the first starting point for him. That's what he says. Then he said, to be spiritual, you have to be moral. So that's the second ladder. So from joyfulness, you go to spirituality. From spirituality, you go to morality. He says, to be spiritual, you have to be moral. Then he says, to be moral, you have to be ethical. So from morality, he now goes to the next step in the ladder down, which is ethicality. And then he says, to be ethical, you have to be honest. So that brings us to honesty. Then he says, to be honest, you have to be transparent. Transparency is very important. So that's the next lower level in the ladder. Then he said, to be transparent, you have to be simple person. You have to be very simple. Even business, all these systems were very simple. Employees don't sign attendance. Suppliers are not given a check afterwards. There is a pigeonhole in which check is deposited. Suppliers will take the check and go. You don't have to go after the accounts payable department and go after them and get your money and so on. Then he says, to be simple, you have to be disciplined. So, this is how he created the ladder. Discipline. From discipline, you develop simplicity. From simplicity, you develop transparency. Transparency, you develop honesty. Honesty, you develop ethicality. From ethicality, you develop morality. From morality, you develop spirituality. And from that spirituality, you find joyfulness. He says, not alone me, my workers will be joyful. So it's a very interesting journey I went through. I have written his interview I have published in IIM B Management Review in the year 2013. Some of you may be interested, you can look at it. But all that I would like to say is that spirituality is not some unwanted, some time pass after you have done everything in life, you have nothing else to do. Let's finally, after you retire, let us start thinking about that. That's a completely a misconception, badly thought about idea. I think spirituality is very required for an individual to be full blown. Only a full blown individual can actually be very successful in whatever he does, including being a manager. So, therefore, I want to conclude by saying spirituality and management, it is high time it coexists. Organizations must invest seriously in spirituality, because if they don't invest in spirituality, they are not going to find the real benefits of employees' full power of that thinking and uncoiled energy being put to use. It helps the organization, it helps the individual, it helps the society. What else can we ask for? So I think with these few words, let me bring it to a conclusion. Thank you for your time.
Yes, sir. It was an wonderful talk. You started with how we are workaholic, and then you went into defining three fundamentals of finite, intermittent, and interpretant, impermanent. So how we are nothing is permanent in life. So you started explaining very well, and spirituality sometimes as someone we ask, it is very difficult to people. It's a complex subject, but you defined it in three stages. How we starts with connecting oneself first, which is the most important thing, and then how the belief system of in supreme power, there is some supreme power in this universe helps us, and then the love, compassion, and the sense of life you explain. Also the risk taking ability. I remember our Guruji, when I was very young and started my career, he started with the sloka karmanyavadikaraste, and he said, just do sincerely the effort. You put your sincere effort, and then rest, you leave it. It will take its own course, and then results are bound to come. So I think that's a wonderful risk taking ability we increase in ourselves. So I think it was wonderful, sir. And then you also explained at the organization level how it can be brought with an excellent example of your Hubli friend, which starts from discipline and then goes to the purity and then spirituality. So that ladder was an excellent explanation and an example how the person was able to do spirituality, bring spirituality in his organization. So I think we all take a very good cue from this talk, and then we'll see how the organizations will take this and how they can implement. And with that, I think we'll conclude. I don't see any questions right now. I think because there was a lot of clarity in the thoughts which you have given on each of the concepts. So with this, I thank you very much, sir, and then for coming to our this 100th lecture series, and then giving us an wonderful direction in this. So we'll definitely meet again at some other time to discuss more on these subjects, sir. So I once again thank on behalf of our International Institute of Vedic Sciences and Rishi Vatika. And with this, we'll close today's session. We have a couple of announcements, and that is tomorrow we have a talk by Dr. Raghav Rao. He is from IIT Tirupati. He'll be talking on spirituality, the pathless path. So with that, we'll join again tomorrow at 11:30. See you all. Namaste.